Karen, you're muted if you're speaking.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Karen Williams, one of the co-chairs of the Portland Utility Board, joined by Kaliska Day, who is also a co-chair, new co-chair, yay. We're going to be co-facilitating today, and I would just like to start by opening the meeting. So welcome, everyone. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely or by phone, and the city has made it available to the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded, as you just heard. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. For any technical difficulties that you are having, please feel free to use the chat function, and the co-host of the meeting will let the facilitators know that something's going on and there is something that needs to be addressed so that you can fully participate. PUB believes and acts upon anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions within PUB. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. We put our principles into action by speaking up and speaking out. Every person on the board is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board. And we ask that we all focus on the impacted individual and the population. We can condemn the conduct without condemning the person. Thank you. And Amy will walk us through some logistics and meeting guidelines.
Great, thank you, Karen. Very quickly, I'll run through these. When you are speaking, please state your name before you speak. And if appropriate, state the name of the person you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the host, so that is PUB staff, Eliza and myself. And for today, Kaliska is also set up as a co-host. Please limit any chats to technical and logistical issues, signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us that you've been waiting to speak. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. Co-hosts may lower your hand once you begin speaking just to maintain the flow of the conversation. During public comment periods, the public can also raise their hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on for the board, presenters, facilitators when speaking. If desired, it's not required. Others should leave the videos off. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If you're using a phone, press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Public comment will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with PUB staff or raise your hand during the comment period. It's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. As mentioned, this meeting is being recorded.
All right, thank you, Amy. So we have a couple items of business and public comment that we'll walk through, but the bulk of our meeting today is going to be a discussion among all of us about and after a quick check-in on our PUB governing documents. Then the bulk of our meeting today is going to be discussing the annual work plan and looking at where we want to put our priorities and our focus over the coming year. And we'll close with a few quick announcements and then adjourn at 12:30. So with that, is there anyone who would like to disclose any communications that they have had with Bureau staff over the last couple of weeks since we've last met? Not seeing any raised hands, nor is Kaliska, it looks like, by Kaliska shaking her head. All right, so no disclosures of communications this month. Thank you. And our next item of business is public comment. So are there any members of the public who would like to make a public comment? And it looks like we have two members of the public who have said that they would like to make public comment today. Is that correct, Amy, Dee White, and Lori McFarlane?
That's correct. First
okay.
up is Dee White and then Lori McFarlane.
Okay, Dee, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
All right. I'm assuming that y'all got the email from Eliza earlier with the bar chart. Otherwise, I can probably share it if you'd like. Share my screen. That I like the visual.
Dee, why don't you just make reference to it rather than share your screen?
Okay,
and
I will.
That will be contained in the public record.
All right, great. Y'all should have gotten this bar chart this morning. I just wanted to briefly explain it. I gave this testimony that I'm about to give yesterday at council, and I'm going to delete the first part because it's unrelated, but and just going to explain the bar chart during that time, using that time. The top three bars are the highest bars. This in the middle are Portland Water Bureau, Rockwood, Portland, and Gresham. The bar chart is based on 2021 water quality reports and on the water lead levels in cities in the Northwest. So that's what this bar chart represents. And the Portland, Rockwood, and Gresham are the three bars in the middle. We are grateful for the national experts, scientists, and citizen advocates willing to inform us accurately and completely about lead in drinking water when our own water officials have not. We are deeply troubled that Portland Water Bureau Director Salmer, her communication staff, and legal teams have suppressed critical facts and have silenced urban and rural residents alike. No town halls were held for the Water Bureau's recent lead action level exceedances in 2016 and 17. Without full disclosure, the public remains in the dark and council decisions ill-informed. The same can be said for the planned $1.5 billion filtration plant, the most expensive treatment option at the most expensive location. Yet a sliver of the federal funding will finance an inadequate response to Portland's long-standing lead in drinking water problem. We've witnessed misinformed commissioners and pub oversight members through no fault of their own. Water Director Salmer does not correct when she hears these inaccuracies on water lead. Asked why not, she said, quote, "It is not within the Bureau's purview to intervene during discussions among pub members who speak to their own experiences. Rather, the Bureau is a resource when called upon by pub members," end quote. By ignoring the lessons of Flint, leaders harm our health and betray the public trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. And Lori McFarlane, please go ahead.
Sure. Good morning. We've been concerned for a while that as an advisory group to City Council, PUB is not getting the full information they need sometimes, such as Portland Water Bureau's years-long issues controlling lead in water. Last month at City Council, we quoted President Biden, who said, quote, "There's hundreds of Flints," unquote, renewing awareness of impacted communities just like us. Portland's chronic lead in water levels are not because of lead in plumbing per se. This is a very important point. We should all insist on clear, not confusing, information that we receive about lead in drinking water. For example, after Newark Public Schools found lead in 2016, residents later learned municipal treatment issues were damaging lead-bearing plumbing that leached higher amounts of lead into tap water. just 1 week ago, Newark announced that they are now half Portland's compliance level. They achieved this through gradual annual reductions and through a national successful 3-pronged strategy using filters first for primary prevention. Yesterday, after showing, I showed a video from a pediatrician to council, and after seeing that, I asked council if they thought city-provided water filters should be used here too for our most vulnerable until the Bureau fixes their lead and water problem. Many national experts have helped us learn the LCR policy, facts, and the science of lead corrosion. And I do have to get back to work, but I am more than happy to answer your questions, following this about anything you heard me say. I'm absolutely happy to, answer or clarify any of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Are there any additional public comments? And Tom, I see your hand raised. If you can hang on just for a second, just making absolutely sure that we don't have any additional members of the public that are waiting. It looks like we do not. So thank you, Dee and Lori. I would just like to state for the record that PUB has received numerous presentations on lead in drinking water, as well as other aspects of lead in the public water system. The recordings of those meetings, the information shared at those meetings is part of the public record and is available for any member of the public to access via the PUB website. So I just want to make sure that any members of the public listening in and our board members are aware of that. And with that, Tom, looks like, Tom, you have something you'd like to say?
Yes, I just wanted to share that several months ago, after hearing Dee's comments at that time, I thought, well, I wonder what my lead level is in my house. So I took advantage of the Water Bureau's free lead testing program, and I had my water tested. Now I live in a house that's 6 years old, so it's got the most up-to-date, hopefully, plumbing that is allowed. At any rate, my lead level came back at 0.11, not 14, but 0.11. So that means that the water coming into my property was at least 0.11, because the location where I took the sample, that's what it was. So in order to be that low, it had to be that low when it comes into the property. So I'm not saying we don't have a lead problem, but it does seem to imply that this idea about it being in the plumbing seems to be information that is, how do I say, well, I don't know. I don't want to take this too far, but perhaps others of us on the PUB could have our lead checked. The Bureau will send you send you the information. What if we all checked our water and see where we are, and maybe that would help inform us a little bit more about what's happening at different places around the city where we all might live or something like that. I don't know, but I just find it, I don't know where the 14 comes from when mine is 0.11. So how can somebody explain that? Anyway, that's my dilemma or confusion. Thank you.
All right, so I see Julia has a comment or question as well. And I would actually like to, yeah, go ahead, Julia, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Finish what you were saying. I apologize.
Well, I was just going to ask if a member of the Bureau that is present at this meeting at this time would like to respond to Tom's question, and if it's not an appropriate time to respond to his question, we could put that on the, we could ask that there's a response to Tom's question at our next meeting in August. So I just want to give some space to any Bureau staff that would like to respond to Tom's question.
Hello, this is Kale.
Hi, Kale. Can you hang on just one sec? I just want to see if any Bureau staff at this time would like to respond to the question, particularly about where the 14 measurement of 14 parts per billion came from. And if not, that's fine.
Hi, everyone. This is Sarah Messier, Portland Water Bureau. I work in the water quality group. And I, part of my work is doing lead education and outreach. I work and driving community members, increasing awareness about our lead testing program. I work closely with our Bureau staff that actually do run that program. I could talk all day about where the 14 comes from and how, Tom, your level is well below 1. So you're right, the water that comes into our homes has low lead levels, and it's when water sits in plumbing that has lead. So when that water is in contact with lead, that's when lead leaches into the water, and that's when we know that there are high-risk homes that have lead solder. Lead solder was commonly used between 1970 and 1985 in our community. And so when it sits in contact with lead, that's when the lead enters the water from house plumbing. So it really is dependent on what your plumbing type is in your house, if you have brass in your plumbing, and how long it actually sits in contact with that. And the 14 that is in the bar chart, it'll take a little bit more explanation. I don't want to take too much time away from the rest of the meeting, but I'd be happy to talk about that, or we can have Scott Bradway come back. He's my my manager, and he can explain more about that too.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Let's see, so I'm just taking a quick look, and I do want to remind folks that we still are in the public comment period. And Lori, I will come back in just a second, although we do need to move on to the business of the board, but I will come back and see if you have anything to add to the public comment that you have already made. So with that, I do want to acknowledge members that may still have questions. Actually, it looks like hands have gone down. Julia and Kale, so okay, thank you very much. And Lori, very briefly, please, if you have anything you'd like to add to the public comment that you have made, please do so in the next couple minutes.
Yes,
go ahead.
Yeah, I would. Thanks so much for that question, Tom. I think it's a really incredibly important one. And by the way, these questions are going on right now with EPA. They're holding roundtables, listening sessions. The policy is being radically revised, hopefully. We're pretty sure it will be. And it's a really, it's one of the top issues right now with EPA. So I thought you should know that. I think this is a really important topic that the Bureau really should be bringing back to you, because last December, during one of those recorded meetings that Karen talked about, we heard a lot of just a little bit too much misinformation. It was very uncomfortable. But anyway, I wanted to add that it's not just the water sitting in the plumbing that leaches the lead out. There's the elephant in the room is the treatment, and whether it is adequate or proper treatment. So basically the corrosion of lead of those plumbing materials, it's inextricably linked to drinking water corrosivity, and the drinking water corrosivity is largely controlled by water utilities. And that is really that's the link. That's the foundation of the lead and copper rule regulation, which requires utilities to control corrosion. Anyway, I just wanted to add that. I hope that's kind of clear, and I'm really glad, Tom, that you brought that question up.
All right, thank you for your comment,
This-
Laurie.
This is Eliza, and I want to chime in really quickly. First, to let people know, I'm working on with a very difficult internet connection. So, pardons if I'm not very clear or not doing things like I normally do. But Julia did have her hand up. I lower people's hands once they're called on, and so I lowered it when she was called, and so. She had texted me and said she could hold it, but if we had time, she would talk. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, Julia or Karen, but I'm just feeling bad because I don't have all the tools I usually have.
Thanks for letting us know, Eliza. That's great. So what I would like to do is close the public comment period and then move our agenda. But before we move our agenda, and the next item of business, I believe, is minutes. Yes, minutes approval. So before we move into minutes approval, Julia and Kale, you both had your hands raised during the public comment period. So I want to make sure and give some space if there's something you'd like to say. Julia, please go ahead.
My initial comment had to do with the answer that the city staff provided. So that was good. But I did realize after what was just said by the public comment, I was under the impression that the city had passed corrosion control measures. I don't know if they've been implemented yet, but I was under the impression that they were under the process of getting ready to do so. So again, it might be a good report back from staff about where we're at with corrosion control, because I was under the impression that the city was being responsive to that and that it's in the works, but I might be misinformed.
Thanks, Julia. We can definitely ask for a report back at our next meeting or a following meeting on that topic, unless it looks like Sarah might want to chime in on that right now.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So our improved corrosion control treatment facility is currently under construction and will be online and running. We have to have it online running by April 2022, so less than a year out. So thank you, Julia, for bringing that up and making that point. So we're on track for that. Yep.
Thank you, Sarah. That means we don't need a report back.
I'm sorry, can I just interject a really quick point about that? It's extremely
actually,
quick.
Lori, our public comment period is closed now, and we are moving
That's
our
fine.
agenda. If
That's
you
fine,
would,
but there is misinformation in what Sarah just said. So I will respect what you just told me, though.
yeah, and we will respect that that you have stated that that's what your perception is. So thank you.
Yeah, it's not my
Thanks.
perception. Actually, it is the lead and copper rule. It's the policy. It's not my perception.
All right. Thank you, Lori. Thanks, Lori. Kale, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. I actually wanted to comment on Tom's idea of maybe having members test and test their water to see if there's variance and what that variance looks like. One thing that I read from one of the comments, I forget the first person who commented, she in her letter she indicated that the levels there wasn't much improvements with the lead levels as compared to the expenses, the expenditures. I'm wondering if we can get some comments on like what type of improvements have been made, and also I like I encourage Lori to submit another statement as far as what she feels was policy and what she disagrees with. I'd be interested in reading it and learning more about what her what her interpretation and her perception of it was.
Okay, and thank you, Kale, for that. Again, I turn to Bureau staff. Sarah, is there anything you'd like to respond at this time to Kale's question, or should we ask for a report back on that at a following meeting?
So for the first part, I'm more than happy for pub members to test their water. It's a free program for residents. All you have to do is go to leadline.org and order your kit. And my colleagues, Katie and Matt, will send you a kit, and it has all the information. So I encourage you all to test your water. I encourage everyone to test their water. And yeah, that's all I have right now. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, and thanks members. Okay, very good. Well, let's move on with a couple of items or just one more item of business before we get into our discussion of our work plan. And that is taking a look at our June 17th minutes that Eliza has composed for us. Are there any corrections or additions that members would like to note for the record to be changed in the June 17th minutes? Going once, going twice, and going 3 times. And hearing none, then June 17th minutes are accepted. All right, governing documents. So as we discussed at the end of our last meeting, we didn't discuss, I guess, as we noted at the end of our last meeting, that the pub has made it a policy that we will do at least an annual review of our governing documents to note areas either A, that we would like to discuss and change right away, if that's possible. Things that we would want to put on our list of items sort of to work on in the coming year, if there's anything in our governing documents that we don't think needs to be an immediate change, but think needs updating, or it's definitely something that we should be turning some attention to in the coming year. And again, the governing documents being the 3 items that the slide is depicting here are beliefs, values, and anti-racist principle statement, the actual city code that covers the pub policies and how the board is authorized and governed, and then our own bylaws that deal more with pub specific policies and how we conduct business. So keeping in mind that these are documents that we have either recently adopted and developed and adopted, and that we have an sort of an ongoing recognition that we do want to update our that we recognize that the city code update that would come from a final decision about how stipends will be not so much allocated, but anyway, a stipend policy is yet to come. That's sort of an open and ongoing issue. But for the most part, these are documents that we have either recently developed or recently updated. So that being said, is there anything in any of these 3 documents that pub members of our board would like to put on the table right now for us to work on and look to updating over the coming year? That was a bit of an awkward intro, but is there anything that members would like to share right now about the 3 documents and changes that you see that need to be made over the coming year? And also, if you think that they're great working documents and we don't need to make any changes at this time and we can move forward, it would be good to hear that from someone as well.
Hello, this is Kale. So I think we should move forward typically with, new rules, guidelines, policies. Questions arise with the actual practices. But I think we should move forward with the flexibility to, review and make changes as needed.
Thank you, Kale.
Hi, this is Gabby. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about moving forward with these documents. I might be a little biased, but I feel like they're good, like working documents. And of course, like I guess as Kel said, like things might arise that we might change something, but that might be further on the future once these are more in practice.
Very good. All right, thank you, Gail, and Kale and Gabby. And let's do that then. Let's move ahead to the next item on the agenda. Thank you so much. All right, this is the meat of our our meeting today, or the substance of our meeting today. And again, pardon me, Kaliska and I will be kind of co-facilitating this part. I'll sort of put the item on the table for discussion, try and make sure that we're capturing what people are saying about our annual work plan. And this is recognizing that Eliza, the amazing Eliza, is internet hobbled right now. So Amy is definitely going to be trying to capture things on screen as we are talking and throwing out ideas about the work plan, but just want everyone to know we're doing our best to capture your thoughts and ideas about the work plan. I'll be scribbling some paper notes here as well. And Kaliska is going to be managing the hands raised and any comments that you all put in the chat. If you are just have something you want to put in writing, so to speak, before you speak it, please do use the chat function as well. And Kaliska is going to be keeping track of all that. So with that said, our annual work plan is our, I'm just, our work plan and our report, as the slide indicates, these are our documents. They are internal in this, or the work plan anyway is internal in this sense, is that this is what we as pub members think are real priorities, real issues that we want to focus on, kind of dive into, work with the Bureau to get more information on in the coming year. The annual report, as the slide is indicating, is more of a very much so is a backwards looking document that certainly can inform how we maybe want to focus our efforts differently in the coming year. But for today, I think we really want to focus on the work plan. We may get to sort of accomplishments and thoughts about things that we want to put in the annual report, but just heads up, we probably won't. We'll certainly pick this work up. We'll get as far as we can today, and we'll pick this work up at our next meeting in early August. Yeah, and yes, just noting that our plan is to have both of these documents finalized, our work plan and the annual report, in September. And these are documents that go to council. And there we go. Yeah, our goal today is to focus on generating enough ideas and input for pub staff. Option at the end of the meeting, if we feel like we've gotten that far, we can ask one or two of our members to work with staff to put things down on paper and bring something back to the pub at our early August meeting for full corroboration. And yeah, I think that's it. Very good.
I'm just going to add one thing just for new members, that this work plan isn't set in stone. It's a flexible work plan. So as topics come up throughout the year, or if there's different items or different agenda things that we think are important, we can always add it to it. So don't think that this is just a concrete set and we're stuck. This is very much a dynamic document. So we can always add and take away as issues arise and things progress. So.
Think excellent framing. And one more thing I just will say, mostly for new members, but also a reminder for returning members, that you'll note in the document that Eliza had sent out to you for us all to kind of take a look at over the last week, that we last year we made a decision to kind of separate out what ended up being called frames. And the kind of the intent behind this sort of introductory framing of our work plan is to kind of convey, given that there are, enormously broad issues and enormously detailed issues that we could and that we could dive into, that it's at some point it is beneficial for us, and I think we're performing good service if we are being very transparent and clear about in a sense, the lenses that we're looking through. The kinds of aspects of issues that are going to mean the most to us, and where we think that we as board members can be most effective. So that's where the framing comes from. And the document that Eliza sent out to you has had some sort of prompts and some thoughts about whether or not the framing that we put forward last year is still relevant. If these are still kind of the lenses that we're going to be looking through. And if not, then how do we want to change that? And then the second part of the work plan is more the actual topics, the very specific topics that we want to focus on. So that being said, I am going to be quiet now and let folks just respond to what they had a chance to review. And we can use the guide of the blue questions, the questions that staff put forward to us, if that's helpful. But if you have something you want to say that doesn't quite fit into an answer to the question, please do let us hear that too. So with that, Kaliska, I'll let you monitor hands and we'll get the discussion going.
So it looks like Alexander has a comment.
Yeah, I did. So in reviewing this document, I'll concentrate on the first one, racial equity. I guess from my perspective, I like this. I like the wording. I think it could be expanded a little bit to not just be racial equity, but equity in general. Let's see, what comes to mind is intersectionality. So putting in there essentially that the board will, what did I write? I actually, The PUB will strive to understand and address the impacts of intersectionality as they relate to the work of the board. So what I'm trying to get at is really just thinking beyond the racial lens. So looking at housing status, income, and the other things that broadly impact communities. So as kind of an example, we can talk about the discussion about lead we were having previously. Looking through a kind of broader equity lens, you start to see that some communities are disproportionately impacted by other types of contamination as well. So for those communities, even though the lead levels might look quote unquote low, because they are faced with multiple different types of exposures, that might also be a concern. So that's just kind of an example of what I'm talking about as thinking a little bit beyond just the racial lens. And let me know if you want any clarification about any of that came across.
Alex, this is Amy. Can you just restate? I missed the language that you provided, and I thought,
oh yeah, let me
to capture that. If you could just restate.
Yeah, and this was just a sentence that I just spit out very quickly. So the PUB will strive to understand and address the impacts of intersectionality as they relate to the work of the board.
So I think we have Kale next. It's the next hand up. And then Tom and then Teresa.
Hi there. I think Alex brings up a good point that, that I wasn't even thinking about. With respect to that racial equity piece. I mean, I think it's a good idea for the BEP to consider, for the pub to consider that it's going to affect more marginalized, communities, and those marginally communities are high. Or a high percentage of BIPOC communities. And so with respect to high levels, in what Sarah was pointing out is that in older homes, there's going to be more potential for high lead levels. And that's going to pretty much affect more lower income families, which come from that, the more low income families, which consists of more BIPOC families. And so operating in a sense and thinking in a sense that any type of adverse actions can affect certain folks, marginalized folks more than others. So just kind of looking at things that things where you may think is a minimal has minimal effect to families. Well, that minimal effect might be a little bit bigger than we think to more lower income families. Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Kale. Tom, did you want to go ahead and comment?
Yes, thank you. I'm a relatively new member, so I started in January 2021. And my understanding of this particular item was, and I'm not sure I've understood it correctly, so I want to mention it now, but I got the impression that because there was specific racial inequality and, for instance, redlining and things like that, that the idea was to have racial equality or equity as an item, kind of standing alone. And then I thought we have someplace else that addresses everything else. In other words, we want equity for everyone, but there is sometimes a need to look at those particular groups that have been previously targeted in a way that was inequitable toward them. So anyway, that's it. I do think too, we will need a definition of intersectionality. I don't know what that means. So that would be important to do that. But I just wanted to put that out there, that that's my recollection of how this was brought about. Thank you.
Okay, Teresa, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so about the racial equity part, this is actually, I think this has been brought up several times as people, as newcomers come on board. And I think Dory, who recently just left the pub, had explained it pretty well previously, which I feel like that should, maybe that the language of what she said could be included in our work plan. But I just also want to add that, you know, this previously we had the same discussion, and the reason why we're putting racial equity, the reason why we're pulling racial equity out as a focus is because it's not that we're not taking other equity factors into, and other groups into consideration. It's not that case. It's just that we recognize that, you know, while other like historically disenfranchised and marginalized groups, you know, such as people with disability, LGBTQ communities, women, elderly, or, you know, low-income residents, they're all taken into evaluation, but we also recognize that, you know, BIPOC community intersects strongly with each of these groups and experience deeper systemic inequality due to institutional racism. And yeah, so we take every kind of equity into consideration, but we know that within each of these groups, racial equity are embedded into each of these. So I don't know if I'm like explaining correctly or well enough, but like, for example, if you take lower income into example, a white low income family and a BIPOC low income family, like the BIPOC low income family is affected much more deeply than its counterparts. And this is the intersectionality that we're capturing here, is that racial equity intersects with each one of the other identities. Yeah, sorry. Sorry if I spoke too fast. Maybe.
No, Teresa, I think that's good. So I do kind of be a little bit conscious of time. Just so these are just lenses that we look through. So this is, I mean, we can always expand them more. So, but these are just things that we as a board have decided. So just kind of keep in mind what we're looking through, because we still do have to get through topics. So, but Gabby, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, just to keep it brief, I'll just say that I agree with Teresa and had a suggestion, but we can move forward, I think, to the topics discussion.
Okay, so let's just, if we're gonna kind of move on to the next one. So just remember, these are sort of overarching. These aren't like necessarily topics of discussion. These are things that we use to look at the topics. So if that makes sense. So for instance, if we're looking at budget or capital spending, these are the lenses that we use. So basically we're kind of asking if there's additional lenses that you guys want to add, or if there's something that we need to pay attention to as far as when we're looking at these different presentations from the different bureaus. So So I don't know, Amy, if you want to, I think we just have 3 of them. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think I heard pretty clearly, it sounded like there was general agreement about the importance of highlighting racial equity, but also acknowledgement of this intersectionality. So, I think we probably have captured that, and we'll use the notes to reflect on that as we move forward. This next section is new draft language to reflect some input that has been received since the last round. So would love some more direct feedback on these. These next 3, this one was reworked. There was the proposal that the outcomes oriented be removed because we found that it wasn't really used in the way intended, and so it can be captured in a different way without it being called out as a separate frame. And then a question on the final one of sustainability and whether people felt like it was helpful to have this frame in prior year, and whether to continue to hold that. So would love to hear feedback from folks briefly on these. And then you guys can dive into the specific work plan topics. So it looks like maybe Alexander.
Great, thanks. And thank you very quickly for the background on the racial equity piece. That was something I was not aware of, so thanks for that. I actually really like the second, the interagency and cross-sector collaboration. Some of the, much of the work that I've done professionally in environmental cleanup has really, you kind of have to look at things in a cross-sectional interagency way to really understand processes and get things done. So I actually really like that particular piece. And then for the sustainability piece, the only comment I had about that was that I wonder if it is appropriate to include any language about climate change in the sustainability section. And yeah, I will stop there.
Okay, thanks, Alexander. Robin, I just wanted to give you, we do have to finish this up by 12:15, so we only have 20 minutes to look at the actual topic. So I just want to make sure we have time for that.
Yeah, actually, the reason I wanted to say something was specifically to see if any of our lenses were about climate change and if that would be under sustainability, because sustainability could just easily mean fiscal sustainability to continue to be able to provide water through piping, and not necessarily climate adaptation and what that means to the Bureau. And so I was thinking about addressing climate risk to the Water Bureau and the BES, like financially impacting, like what does it cost in dollar amounts each year? How are the workers impacted? Is climate change going to affect layoffs within the bureaus? And like, how are the customers also going to be impacted? And, at the end of the day, the ratepayers are the ones who are going to likely pay for the majority of the adaptation. It feels like a lot of what's happening right now, we lend responsibility to consumers. And so I think about, does sustainability, is that specifically around climate change, or do we need to have climate change as something that's not labeled sustainability? Because sustainability to me is like a very softened word for saying that we're addressing this immense crisis level global issue that impacts all of us, some of us more, and it is sometimes softened by calling it sustainability rather than a crisis.
This is Eliza as your drafter to give background. I think both those points are wonderful. So I'll give brief background and then give you all aboard a question, which is the sustainability, if it was drafted last year, really didn't focus on climate change. And it was really the folks who proposed the idea had this broad encompassing notion of sustainability beyond just a sort of green infrastructure, but also sustainability and workforce development and et cetera. And so I think I see you all could go a couple ways. You could choose to totally drop sustainability from your list of priorities. You could decide and put climate change in there. You could decide to make, or you could decide to say climate change and interconnected sustainability issues and have the emphasis be on climate change, or you could keep sustainability as it is and add climate change as a fourth topic, or lens rather.
So Eliza, I'm thinking that maybe we just keep sustainability and we just kind of subcategorize it. So we could have one that's just, you know, sustainability as far as like asset management and making sure that we have functioning systems. And then we could have climate change. So there's just, I know it's like two lenses, I mean, subcategory lenses. I don't know if that just makes it. So Tom, did you want to chime in?
Yes, if I could. Regarding just the existing sustainability statement, I think that it's limited by looking at asset management, maintenance, and operational strategies. I think we have to go all the way to the beginning, talking about policy, engineering, design, and various other issues, the whole range of what the bureaus do. So in terms of, if we leave sustainability, I would add that broader range of the Bureau's responsibilities into it. But I really like this discussion about how we figure out how to do this with regard to climate change, because I think it is an important issue. Just a little background, I used to work for the Bureau of Environmental Services for 26 years. And during that time, we often interacted with Water Bureau and other bureaus. But at that time, that the idea was, well, there's never going to be a problem, and and then climate change was on the horizon. But now, as we're starting to get these strange things happening with the weather, I'm starting to think, well, what are the bureaus talking about with regard to the sort of undesirable effects of climate change? That, because we don't want to put our heads in the sand and not think about, well, what do we do if we start running out of water at Bull Run? And things like that. Do we start a program where we really start looking at recycling wastewater and start looking at that kind of thing, like they're doing down in the Southwest? I forgot where I heard on the news or something. Anyway, so I think they're both really important, and how we craft it, I think, is really a good idea.
Okay, thanks, Tom. And then Kale, I'll come to you, and then I think we do need to move on because we only have 15 minutes. So we do give adequate time for discussion.
Yeah, I'll be real brief. I really don't like sustainability. Sustainability kind of, to me, implies that we kind of like the status quo and looking for ways. I prefer to kind of go from an innovation or a efficiency lens, where we look at better and finding ways to either reduce costs, improve technology, just be innovative and be better. So those are my things that I'd like to see. And as far as like administrative and fiscal responsibility, I'd like to see more cost reduction strategies. So that's why I don't like sustainability, because I don't really think the status quo is all that great either.
Thanks.
This is Eliza. I feel like if you all give a thumbs up if I'm capturing sort of basic intent, because this is going to come back to you for what I've gotten wrong, is call out climate change more directly, more obviously as a lens. And then number two, sustainability, change that wording, change the name, sort of along the lines Kale was talking about, and make it broader and asking more questions. And thumbs up if I've captured sort of where people are going and that works for people.
I think that you've got it. So what I would encourage, Kale, if you want to, if you have some phrasing that you would like to use or something that you think would be good to kind of capture more of what you're looking for. Also, those who have chimed in as well, just to send it over to Eliza, just like, hey, this is kind of what I would like to see as a goal or a lens or something that we incorporate. So then we can perhaps bring this back, and if we all like it, then we can move forward. So Sarah, it looks like you have a hand raised as well.
Yeah, this is a general question or comment. Since this is my second meeting, as a reminder, I'm Sarah Messier from the Portland Water Bureau. How are these lenses used? Like, is this for pub to use as an umbrella for our work? Is this a lens that the bureaus should be incorporating somehow? Is this something that, like, if bureau staff come and give presentations, do they touch on all of these things? Like, I'm just trying to wrap my brain around how this is used and what the expectation is for bureau staff who come to the pub to share information.
Karen, did you want to chime in on this?
I did. Thanks, Kaliska, and thanks for that question, Sarah, because that is exactly how we intended these frames to be used, or that's one of the ways that we intended for them to be used, is to help bureau staff who are coming to present us information, or come to us looking for our input, that to be very upfront about again, that these are, I keep coming back to the lenses that we look through, but even within a topic like the low income assistance program or treatment options, whatever the topic is, we are going to be sort of looking at the aspects of that topic through these 3 or 4, or however many we end up with, frames. And part of the intent was that should help bureau staff and leadership understand, like, where we're going to be asking questions, the kinds of information that we're going to be asking for, where we're going to be asking to drill in deeper, are going to be on these sort of these aspects of whatever issue it is that is being brought forward to us. Yeah. So I think those two things, helping bureau understand where we're coming from, but also I think helping the greater public and members of the public that are interested in pub also understand where we see ourselves being perhaps the most able to affect change is within these, again, 3 or 4, however many we end up with, areas. So
that's really helpful. One thing I'd love to see that captured in this document then, so that there's just that greater awareness of how these are used for both the public and for staff to understand that.
Okay. So I think we're just making sure we don't have, okay, so I think we're good there. Eliza will take our feedback. And again, I encourage those who have commented, if there's certain verbiage that you would like to see put into those lenses or formulated, it helps, give Eliza a little bit more direction. So we're capturing all that we need to. Okay, so on to the next one. This is our draft work plan of priorities. Now, Eliza, remind me, are these ones that we came up with last year and we're just revisiting?
Those are ones you came up with last year and we're revisiting. The blue and the stripe through indicates where I've already sort of kind of tried to capture what I've been hearing from you all and suggest a change. But I tried not to, it's walking a fine line. I didn't want to just change everything because I want your all's input, but the blue is trying to start the conversation, if that makes sense.
And this is Amy. I think the one piece that I would add is just to make it clear is that the things in bold are kind of the kind of ongoing things that happen every year. And so either required by code or just things that pub typically has taken on annually.
Okay, thanks for that. And then also just as a note, don't think that we're limited to these topics. So if you see something that's not on here that you guys want to add, or if there's something, you know, that you've heard, so don't think that this this list is the only thing that we can add to our list of what we'd like to talk about. So this helps. Go ahead.
I have one more clarifier just to, in case people didn't, I can't remember if there's been discussion about this specifically, is that at least the way that we've done it prior year is that we have this level 1 is where we're starting, and that's like the highest priority that typically board meeting time is dedicated to. And then there's the level 2, which are also still priorities and may move up to, you know, meeting time based on what's happening in those topic areas, the timing of when it's relevant, that kind of thing. And then the level 3 are still priorities for the board, but are often things that are updates that are happening outside of meetings, or you know, maybe written materials are provided, or if there's meeting time and, you know, you have space to update them, then you would go to that level. So that's been the thinking behind the 3 levels. So it's not necessarily that things in level 3 aren't important. It's just that you're less likely to dedicate meeting time to it.
Okay, thanks for that, Amy. So I don't know if everybody has, if they can see it or if they can bring it up as well. We'll just kind of dive right in. And Kale, if you wanted to go ahead and chime in.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the level 1. So I look at one of the things that I see, that the first topic, hiring, retention, and promotion of BIPOC staff. What I see is that was a level 1 priority. But then when you look at the accomplishments, there wasn't information on the outcome. You know, where do you do and how do you measure that? And I think that's something that's important to you know, to indicate is how did you measure that BIPOC staff is being retained and, you know, and promoted at an acceptable level? And what are some progress? And if there weren't any progress, what do we need to do and what do we need to change in order to get there? So that was one of the things that I saw. I think there was also about staffing levels, and I also want you know, think about how do you expand your applicant pool, considering that if you know, continue to recruit certain pools, and if you recruit and expecting to get better results, but then you don't change your pool of applicants, then you're not going to get better results. So what I want to see is more intentional effort into doing. Are we advertising job opportunities? Are we doing more cultural specific organizations? Are we you know, working with developing strategies, job development strategies with the staff? How are we doing it?
Okay, thanks, Kale.
Those are really good points. And I'm going to add, Kayla, I'm going to add a little additional background that this is a new topic. You can see I did a strike through because it came up at the very end in conversations at the very end of the previous fiscal year. It feels like it came up in May and June, if I'm remembering right. And in fact, this one is one of the topics that we were calling out for further explanation below the table, precisely because it's a complicated sort of multi-pronged issue with multiple different efforts that need to be taken and evaluated. And so there's a little paragraph underneath the table that further dives into it about what you would be looking for in the coming year, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Eliza.
Alexander?
Sure, I just got a couple of things. First of all, I like that bullet item we were just talking about, the hiring, retention, and promotion of BIPOC staff. At the bureaus, I have my own saga with trying to get a job at the City of Portland Bureau of Environmental Services. I could talk a lot about that, but I like having that as one of our items. And then also the resiliency and emergency planning. I really like that point. A lot of the things I'm hearing from community at this point are very much about how do we plan specifically with respect to climate change, with seismic hazards in the area. I did kind of have a note just saying maybe climate change actually needs to be another bullet under resiliency and emergency planning. I think there's some overlap there between kind of specific hazards associated with climate change, but also more systemic things that may not necessarily fall under resiliency or emergency planning that have to do with climate change as well. So, and then yeah, I did have a question about the Portland Harbor Superfund bullet item on the second level, second tier items. I was just kind of wanting a little bit of clarification on what that is. So I'll leave it at that.
That is a written annual report, and the pub has always asked to see it. And it's from the city, and it's sort of their annual report of what they focus on and what they've done in the year. And so that's the short version of it. And I guess I'll add that it could become, Portland Harbor could become its own topic rather than just, like something that you would want to do at a meeting rather than just getting the written annual report.
Okay, and okay, that does clarify things. So I would probably propose that Portland Harbor become its own level 1 item, just because of the phase of the project we're in. I don't know if everybody's aware, but we're getting to the point where EPA is in remedial design for all of the sub sites, and there are going to be a lot of impacts from that, both financially as well as physically in neighborhoods. So that's just my suggestion for that.
Thanks, Alexander. Karen Williams.
Thanks, Kaliska. 3 comments I'd like to make about the level 1 projects. I would advocate for keeping the houselessness, I can't quite think how it's worded, impacts of houselessness in level 1. And I say that because one of the outcomes of the presentation that we heard a couple of meetings ago was that the work that's been done has been primarily funded in sort of pilot phases and by grants, and the bureaus are going to be expanding potentially highlighting particular budget items for how the 2 bureaus are integrating this work into their business. So I think that's important to keep in level 1, because I very much want the pub to be involved in that, and able to influence those kinds of decisions. The second thing is on the performance metrics was, I believe that was another option. I think that might have even been crossed out, but I would advocate for keeping it. And that is because it's something that we just didn't kind of get to last year, but I still think it's important. And that, it almost comes up naturally in our inquiries around budgetary items and prioritization and how we're spending money. It certainly is integrated, as Kale pointed out, in the integrated into staffing decisions and so forth. So anyway, I think that's important to keep in level 1, because I actually think it's our job to monitor that. And the last thing was on the apprentice program. I can see, I wouldn't eliminate that entirely as a topic of interest and inquiry. I can see moving it to level 2. I think there are, potential connections with the retention and promotion, hiring, retention, and promotion of BIPOC staff, but I do think it is its own, it has its own, I believe, its own relationship to, again, budgeting, and I'll use the word sustainability, but I mean it really in the terms of sort of resilience of the Bureau staffing and expertise, what do you call it, succession planning. So I can see lowering apprentice program perhaps to level 2, but I wouldn't eliminate it entirely. And that's it. Thank you.
Karen, this is Karen, this is Eliza. I have a clarifying question on that.
Okay.
Which is, if you scroll to the bottom of the table, thank you, Amy. There is a paragraph that's a call out about hiring, retention, and promotion of BIPOC staff, and it's there that we call out there that there was. It needs to go a little further, I think. It's there that the apprenticeship program was actually an internship and like seasonal employment or casual employment versus ongoing employment, all that, and the career pathways and collecting the data, where that's kind of called out in more detail. And so I think my question to you is, and maybe to the whole board, is that for those complicated topics that are really also high priority for you, we can do. Does that grouping work, or would you still like apprenticeship programs called out on its own in the table? And I'm fine either way, just wanting to get some clarity.
Well, Eliza, this is Karen, and I mean, I can certainly think more about that, and I don't need to, think out loud and take time to do that. But my off the top of my head inclination is I still would like to see it called out as an individual topic, recognizing that it is certainly an important element of the hiring, retention, and promotion of BIPOC staff. But I think it has its own issues, and the succession planning is just one of them that I think is important to treat almost as its own topic. That being said, I'm willing and open-minded to how we could integrate that in other ways. And I think as you point out, Eliza, broadening it beyond this apprentice program into internships and something like that, I'm certainly open to that. But I would like to see it reserved as a separate and a topic in and of itself, but happy to, lower it. Yeah, if other folks, don't agree, is totally
if that
fine.
works for everybody else, that is good information. I can take that. That makes sense to me. I think I understand where you're going. And forgive me if I don't and make a mistake.
No, I think we're good. So, Tom, you were next in line.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate all the work that's going on. This is great. I did want to bring up an issue, the rate study, the BES rate study. We haven't talked about that, but I feel it's very important. And I made some comments back when we were doing the budget, because BES was suggesting, and I guess they did, cut the budget relative to the rate study, and they said they would explain that to us later, and it wasn't a problem. But I did provide information about what I consider, and I think, what I consider to be the inequity of the stormwater fee on single-family residential properties. And so I think it's very important that we really look at this. I've been told that, I don't know if this is true, if anybody from the BES knows, but that the Bureau of Environmental Services has discontinued charges on houseboats and other certain river properties. At any rate, I just feel it's very important. Alexander mentioned, the harbor. There's a way that they figured out how to charge all of the customers, all of us, for the harbor. And it's, in my mind, it's, I have a lot of question marks about it. It doesn't seem to make sense, but somebody came up with a rationale to do it. So I think there's a lot that's in the rates that is really related to equity. And that the more we look at that, I think we'll find that we can help, especially people of lower income, all of them, BIPOC and others, that are paying perhaps a higher share than what they should be relative to many of the issues that go into the rates, which could be a can of worms. But anyway, I think it's really important that we address that.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
I think you were next. Kale, I don't know if you're on mute.
Oh, yes, yes. So I wanted to go back. Definitely agree with what everybody, and just want to reiterate that I think it should be a second, second bullet in itself. And I don't think that we should prioritize that to level 2. I think that it should stay at level 1 along with the hiring and retention. Because, as I mentioned in other areas, I think we have to be intentional in our efforts. And if we're not intentionally doing it and prioritizing it, then it'll get lost in some way when it comes to equity. So I think we need to do, and we definitely need to look for ways to expand those apprenticeship opportunities, internship opportunities, and higher rates of BIPOC students, schools with school districts and schools with higher rates of BIPOC districts and things like that, to kind of reach out to a more diverse pool, or to create a more diverse pool of participants.
Okay, thanks for that, Kale. And then Alexander.
Thanks. I'll try to keep this one really short. I actually just really wanted to also support adding the item that Tom mentioned about the rate study to the level 1. One of the comments I've received from community members has specifically been about that stormwater Portland Harbor charge, and specifically why residential clients are being charged at the same rate as industrial clients for that. So I think that is something I'd like to see in there as well.
Okay, great, perfect. Okay, I guess my only 2 cents it sounds like maybe based on our conversation, the lead and corrosion control might be elevated as well. Just giving public comment and just sort of the discussion we had today. So maybe that moves up to level 1. And then Kale, you have another comment?
Yes, in support of Alex and Tom's, prioritizing to the rate study to a 1. And I was also thinking that it would also should include, include like an equity lens, as far as, the study should include how it affects whether it be income levels or income levels, or even with regard to specific BIPOC communities. I think it'd be good to know and help guide how we develop rates and increase and things like that.
Okay, thanks. So we're kind of at time, I guess. Just to provide a little more feedback to you, Eliza, since you're going to be kind of compiling this. As far as the equity, the internal and external facing, I do think now that we have a pretty substantial lens for this. And I think also in our discussions about retention and hiring and that kind of thing, I do believe that these could be covered. So I'm fine with striking those. So if there's somebody who has like a firm opposition at this point, I think we have those included in other areas. Let's see, the multilingual premium pay, I know this is something that we had talked about, and it looks like there is a pilot phase. I guess since we had talked about this previous, maybe we just move it to a level 2. I would just love to hear maybe just a report back, like, how was it rolled out?
Oh, sorry, keep going.
No, just, is it effective? Is it implemented? I think maybe just a report back on it, just a brief, maybe kind of 5 minutes of this is where we're at. I think a status update would be good. So we can move that down to a level 2. And then small business utility relief. I guess my question would be, would this fall under financial assistance programs and billing, or is this a completely different program by itself?
The proposal I was making, and I don't know that we have time to finish talking about it today, and it's okay if we don't, is that because financial assistance and financial assistance to, again, there's a paragraph at the bottom describing it, but in talking about financial assistance, you all have been focusing on applying an equity lens. You've been looking at residential folks, people who are residential or renters who pay the bill indirectly. And you've also been looking at small businesses, and you've been asking good and hard questions about how that financial assistance program can be improved and be more equitable. And you've also sort of been doing those same series of types of questions around billing, whether that's how the Water Bureau is resuming billing, how the bill is designed, all those questions. And so because there's a lot of overlap in them, I had made a proposal to have one bullet point that said financial assistance programs and billing. And then when you scroll down, again, because it's a multifaceted topic, there's a paragraph that explains that you all are prioritizing looking at, for instance, financial assistance to veteran consumers, small businesses, blah, 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 what I just said. And again, I'm open to it not working that way. It was just a thematic organizing idea that might not work.
No, I think that's good. Yeah, I think if we kind of have, again, sort of subcategorize it, like these are, the things that we have concern on, I'm fine with it. So in the interest of time, because we are at 12:30, so Eliza, if you want to talk about next steps, I think you're just going to summarize what we talked about today, and then we might just revisit this list on the next one. So I'll let you talk about next steps.
Yeah, I think our next steps will be, thank you everybody for all the good work today. The next steps would be that I'll take what was talked about today, try to redraft something, I guess I actually have one question. I'm thinking out loud because this whole work plan will make more sense when it's fit in with the accomplishments and impacts from last year and a draft annual report, like how it all flows together. So I'm wondering if what maybe makes the most sense is any of you who have additional individual thoughts. As I said in the chat, you can text, email, or call me. And I'll keep compiling all those and pulling everything together. And then it's unclear to me how quickly it's going to be going to get the accomplishments and impacts, because I'm interviewing the different bureau staff and et cetera. But so probably we wouldn't return to this until the second August meeting at the earliest, or at the first September meeting. But the conversation today also actually helped identify sort of agreed priority topics, so that when the co-chairs are meeting with Bureau leadership next week, we'll be able to slot in the topics for the content topics for your August and September meetings. And so we'll actually be starting to implement your work plan even as it's in draft phase, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Eliza. Robin, did you have a?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I know that if more than 2 pub members meet together, it has to be an official public meeting. And I was wondering, what's the best way to connect with other pub members outside of these meetings? Maybe just one-on-one, and that way we can get to know each other better, but also continue these discussions in between the pub meetings. Is email best?
Email, text, or phone call, or meeting virtually or meeting in person. They're all absolutely okay. And when I send out like the read ahead, you're all in the 2 fields. So if you ever want somebody's email address, you can email me and ask, but that's it. And I guess I'll also put out there, if there's anybody that was totally excited about the conversation today and wants to help and loves writing or wordsmithing or organizing ideas and wants to help me with what we learned today, I'm happy to take that help. I really like this to reflect your all's ideas, and your voice. So happy. And you don't have to volunteer now, but I would love that if anybody wants to.
This is Amy, and Robin, I guess the one thing that I want to say just for the record too is, when you said kind of 2 pieces for connecting. One is getting to know each other, which is great. That can happen anytime. Continuing the conversation, I just exercise caution on that, because the conversation itself around where you're deliberating or making decisions or talking about these topics should really happen with all of you in this kind of public meeting setting. So you can certainly have one-off conversations and certainly ask questions and do some of the logistical work of helping craft things that then will come back to the board for decision. But again, just we still have to be cautious about continuing a conversation that should take place in a public meeting, if that makes sense.
Thanks for that, Amy. So Robin, I guess my suggestion would just be, we have each other's email addresses and just kind of be conscious of, however anybody wants to be contacted. I know it's a little bit weird because we're all still virtually. So I think with that, we're good. As far as next meeting, so what I'm going to encourage the pub staff, all of our board members to do is, this is just a little bit of homework, maybe just select 3 topics that you guys maybe want to hear in the next couple meetings. So the work plan that we discussed today, we talked about our level 1s, level 2. If we get that information, then we as co-chairs can help guide the conversations and make sure that we're meeting what expectations as far as what you guys want to hear about and what we want to talk about. I know I personally have some opinions, so Eliza and I will talk about that. So if you guys want to email just maybe 3 of these things, like, hey, I'd really love to hear about this in the next 2 meetings or in August, so we can at least start working through this work plan. So I think that's it, unless Eliza, Amy, is there anything else? I think we're good to go.
I think we're past time. Eliza, was there anything on the announcements list that was critical to happen today in this meeting? Okay, not hearing any, just expect to have an email if possible, but otherwise I know that we are at the end of time. So we'll let one of the chairs call it.
Okay, well, since I'm here, I'll call it. So I just want to thank everybody for the wonderful input. I look forward to this next year and getting to know everybody. And yeah, please do email Eliza. Let's get these topics going. So that I'm going to say we're done.